Hello and welcome back to UML Operator. In this channel, we're going to talk about how to use UML for asset management. In our last episode, we built out the framework for our asset repository, and our focus is on technical or architecture assets. But as I define assets in the last episode, and you should know, it's anything that's important to you, all right, that you want to manage. That could be really anything. I mean, we manage assets for our architecture. We manage and support businesses that manage the assets within their operations, whether you're a very small shop or you're a very large enterprise or company that has a huge warehouse, 100,000 plus square feet, and you want to understand where assets are located and you're managing them. All the way down to even managing your home assets. Well, that could be homes, your real estate, or your individual living property. So asset management is mission critical in anything we do in life, whether it's technical or non-technical. So in today's effort, what we're going to be doing is talking about managing our technical assets. And I may touch on other assets, such as our shared intelligence repository and what we may be doing there. There are literally thousands of assets that we need to manage. And in this particular repository, there's thousands. And it's very important that we understand how we're running our business, our shop, small or extremely large. I worked for one of the largest enterprises in the world, 300,000 plus employees, 40,000 different technical people that delivered the company. And so, asset management, I can't quit talking about it. So let's dive in. So I want to say again that an asset repository is a structured, centralized space where you store reusable elements, assets. You can call them UML elements or just objects, but they're data entities that represent the assets within your shop, your organization, even your household, right? So these could be things like use cases, components, class models, elements, diagrams, and these help to improve model consistency and collaboration. So it's more important to focus on building blocks, whatever those are. In our case today, it's going to be applications, APIs, platforms, rather than diagrams themselves. However, there are core diagrams that you're going to have as part of your assets that help bring things together, whether you're talking about platforms or you're talking about individual elements and the relationship to each other. So in Sparx Enterprise Architect, we have a well-structured repository that helps optimize reusability, ensure consistency, and improve accessibility, right? So I want to go over, first thing is a couple of pro tips as we get started here. So the first pro tip is have a link to your asset repository within the body of your model project. So we'll be able to get to our asset repository. Within our asset repository, we have something that may be called a configuration management database. And this is simply flat file XML using XMI, XML metadata interchange that represents the structure of your asset repository. In this particular case, our CMDB basically contains an ability to export and even reuse for import a particular Sparx XML. So you'll see APIs all the way down to service layer. And here you see APIs all the way down to service layer. So you organize your asset repository and your doc repository, your document, your shared document repository for managing your assets and sharing your assets outside of your Sparx model. The next pro tip is to use patterns and templates in Sparx EA to standardize your UML models, your projects, to help accelerate workflows. So in this particular case, we have one root node, and we have a second root node and a third root node, right? So the way this is organized is that we have Sparx assets that we will manage separately in a separate root namespace from our asset repository. As we're bringing in assets, we have a staging area, and the staging area is used to bring assets, new assets, potentially modified assets, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that in just a moment, in from project releases. So as a project goes out, you may have updated your CMO, your current mode of operation assets, as well as added some future mode assets, some new assets that will be coming in, whether they're internal or whether they're vendor platforms that you've brought in and how they're applicable to your particular shop, business, or enterprise. So one of the things I said in the last episode was that you really want to stay to one root node. And in this case, we actually are. Sparx assets, these are things that may be external to our asset repository that we want to have included in the project to help support the delivery of our primary asset repository. In this case, it's a technical asset repository. However, you're just not going to import something in without it going through the proper governance, proper steps. So everything comes in through a staging area. And at that particular point, it goes through your governance body. And that governance body may be one or two stakeholders, people that look over the asset, make sure that it's ready to be merged or brought into your asset repository. But have a staging area, follow a means of dev, which is your primary area. You may be developing assets in here, or you may be bringing in developed assets from a project release or releases that need to be gone through from a development perspective. And then as they're going through approval, they'll go into stage. And as they come out of stage, they'd be I want to say replaced, but I don't want to say replicated. I want to say introduced or added to your primary asset repository. Now, one of the things about this particular asset repository is that the root node here under package control, you can see by the red marker here, represents the overall asset repository for the company, the production environment, if you will. This is actually a staging asset repository that brings in assets. We're able to do differences and do compares. And then at a particular point when we're ready to release, we will take the SQL or even a flat file where you're going to be doing a merge from our primary asset repository, and we will merge it into our target production asset repository. All right. I hope this is making sense because this is very important. You do not want to add things that disrupt your assets or may cause risk in reuse, because the production asset repository is in a SQL environment for production that any authorized stakeholder can have access to. They can get to the SQL database. Your data science group that's mining this data into their data warehouse, big data environment for advanced analytics, they're going to want to understand, all right, this is validated and stable asset intelligence. All right. So very, very important that you're introducing reuse and processes you're going through in delivering your assets for asset management in any size shop. Now, the reason why I shared our shared intelligence repository, and this is a stripped down version, I wanted to make sure we're not sharing too much intelligence in YouTube, but This is basically a place where stakeholders can come in and understand how to deliver. That includes the practices and processes, anything within your business, your shop, your home life, all right? So we have an overview that steps people through agility in delivering your things, your assets, how to estimate properly within any delivery exercise, and much more. So, of course, I'm TOGAF certified, live and die by TOGAF. So we want to make sure that folks understand what the open architecture framework looks like and how it's applied to your company needs. You deliver UML models the same way you deliver anything, and I'm focused on delivering code. So just like delivering code, you use various artifacts to support that delivery. You do the same thing with your model XML, your model data. So everything goes through methods and procedures. There are certain requirements that we're driving the change. They lead down to design and then eventually delivery. Within that, you have scope, some sort of definition of what is changing, and then you have a request for change. It may have relevant project request information, change request information, and much more. So that's very important to follow your practices. It's, of course, one way to see if your practices and processes really are working and whether they're agile or not. So we're going to wrap up here. I want to talk about, speaking about delivery, governance. So just like in delivering your software or anything else, you have your business, you have your operations, they're following some sort of process management. There's some sort of group, whether you're calling them the program management office or something else. There is an area where all your stakeholders can come and collaborate. Here we have our assets, in particular, our common services and the architecture relevant to it. And then you have everything that is supporting it. But governance is mission critical in delivering any of your architecture assets. You have to ensure that you're looking at your corporate policies, business policies, process policies, most important, compliance policies, and then your technologies and standards, right? Compliance. And then probably, as what I should have said was even more important, is your security policies, because your asset repository is going to be discoverable in some sort of service-oriented manner, a repository in which others that are authorized are able to access it. So there's so much more to talk about. I wanted to get, first of all, the framework out there and what we're using for understanding what our assets are and delivering them. I wanted to talk about how we're populating our assets via XMI. Let's go to our asset repository. So things are going to come in, eventually land in your configuration management database where you're keeping all of these artifacts, the XML, and everything that you're going to be bringing in to your asset repository, regardless of what assets. We talked about also managing your assets as separately as possible. And I, introduced the idea that, well, here I've got an asset repository, but it also has Sparx assets and staging. These just support the primary, right? What we want to keep, we don't want to include our shared intelligence data within our asset repository, because this world here is constantly changing. And we want to manage the SQL instance separately from our technical assets. And there are so many more assets that we can talk about. We spoke about the fact that, well, this particular shop also has other assets. They've got real estate assets, they've got office and business, central office, branch office, and so on, assets that they want to manage. The applications, the hardware infrastructure may be deployed differently between any office space, warehouse space, and even the home offices. So in this particular case, You have executives that may want to understand how they're utilizing and then locking down their home office from the rest of their living space as it's applicable to their operations, as it's applicable to delivering and managing their assets across their enterprise. All right, we're going to start closing now. I told you, you can manage just about anything in Sparx Enterprise Architect, technical or non-technical. It is a thick client user interface sitting over a database, a SQL database. And so you let your imagination flow on what you can do with your own intelligence, all right? It's very important to understand where your assets are. Start from the very beginning. Oh my goodness, I've gone into shops that have their assets spread over many different platforms, and managing them is nearly impossible. Sparx Enterprise Architect makes it easier, which differentiates it from other modeling tools in doing so. Now, this is a very simple example. We can drill down into our application assets, and in the company that I retired from, we had over 2,000 assets. So you're certainly not going to put them in one view like this, right? It would be a more complicated hierarchy in which you're able to search or get to your assets. But in this channel, you've learned how to take particular assets, how to use namespaces to understand where they're from, how to deal with the internal metadata that may be under each one of them and the intelligence that you're supplying to them, and so much more. So we're able to drill down into just about any particular area and get right down to not only the elements and all of the model metadata that's underneath it, but we can also drill down to our code. So thanks very much for watching this. Please let me know if you have any concerns about managing your own assets, all right? Are you doing things differently? Share it with us. I'm always looking for new ideas, a way to manage the data effectively, and I look forward to that. Comment down below, or I try to read the email and stay up with that. But like and subscribe here if you haven't already subscribed, and let's keep up together, all right? Till that next episode, happy modeling.